So I did another reading challenge of some sort. This one took a little bit longer than my previous reading challenge, but I basically wanted to give a couple of authors that I've tried in the past a second chance. This idea came up because I wanted to read another Penelope Douglas book, just because I know that she's got a lot of books out. A lot of romance readers really like her stuff, and so yeah, I wanted to give her a second chance basically. So for this challenge, I gave myself a little bit of a rule. I wasn't going to try authors that I had DNF'd books from. I wanted to specifically give ones a second chance where I did finish their book, so they were like bearable enough for me to finish the book. I just didn't necessarily like him. So like I said, the first author that I really wanted to give a second chance to was Penelope Douglas. I first read one of her books back in 2018. I read Bully by her, which was marketed to me as a enemies to lovers bully romance. I think it was young adult. I think they were in high school, I'm pretty sure. There were a couple of things that I didn't really like about that book. Her version of enemies to lovers is a little bit darker and a little bit angstier than what I'm used to. I also didn't like the romance aspect between the two characters in Bully. I just felt like it was like this like angry sort of romance. Do you know what I'm talking about? That's how I felt throughout the whole book. And so I put it in my disappointing reads of 2018, I think. But since then, I have heard a lot about Punk 57. I hear that it's pen pals and it's really, you know, it's a really good enemies to lovers story, and so I wanted to check it out. I finished Punk 57 by Penelope Douglas. We follow Misha, our hero, and Ryan, our heroine, who were paired up as pen pals when they were, I think, in primary school. They ended up really hitting it off and really, you know, enjoying each other's letters so much that 7 years later, which is where the present time is, they're 18 years old, and they haven't stopped writing letters to each other. So they've just sort of become best friends through these letters, through being pen pals basically. The only catch with their friendship is that they're not allowed to seek the other one out, like in the real world. They know where each other lives, and because, you know, they have to send the letters, and they know that they only live a town apart from each other, so they go to different schools. But their rule is that you're not allowed to look each other up on Facebook, you're not allowed to try to find the other person in their town, you know, stuff like that. So that's just kind of been their rule for the past 7 years. So in the beginning of the book, Misha is in a band, and his band has set up this fundraising charity thing to raise money for something, scavenger hunt little event at a warehouse in the town that Ryan lives. And so in the back of his mind, while he's like going to this event, he's like, what if there's a chance that I see Ryan? Because he really wants to see her. We find out later on that this rule that they're not allowed to like find each other was like Ryan's idea. And so Misha has always wanted to meet up with her because Misha just feels so connected to her and everything like that. So he goes to this warehouse scavenger hunt party event thing, and he sees someone, and he like realizes that her name is Ryan, and he broke a rule and he looked her up on Facebook, and he realizes that that is the Ryan that he's been talking to. But the catch is, with this whole interaction in the beginning of the book, Ryan doesn't know that this is her Misha, basically. And so after that, cut to 3 months later, something happens I won't tell you about, but Misha ends up at Ryan's school. So remember, Misha knows who Ryan is, but Ryan doesn't know who Misha is, and that's sort of the majority of the book. I think that's all I'm gonna say. I don't want to confuse you because I got a little bit confused trying to figure out what the synopsis was, but once you start, if you start reading it, you'll kind of pick up on what's sort of happening. I didn't really like this book, and it's not, I've realized this, it's not her writing style. Her writing style is actually what makes me want to keep reading her books, even though I don't enjoy her plots and her characters, because I think she does a really good job of creating the vibe, creating the atmosphere, creating the emotions of the characters to seep into just everything else to make this whole vibe that you're reading, I guess. And I guess the vibe of Penelope Douglas books, now that I've read 2 of hers, is angsty, sort of like that 2008, 2009, 2010 era of like grungy emo scene kid kind of vibe, which I think what makes me not hate this book, because I think if I were to have read it when I was younger, when I was going through my emo phase, I think I would have enjoyed it a lot more. But yeah, I think the angst just felt like it's just not the type of romance that I go for these days. I also, the way I read romance is I'm looking for a good time, right? I'm looking for, it doesn't necessarily have to be lighthearted, although I do read a lot of lighthearted books, but I do go into romances for some level of feel good, right? And I didn't feel any feel good vibes from this book, which is fine. It doesn't have to, you know, not every romance has to have a feel good vibe to them, but that's just my particular taste in romance. And this book felt very serious with some of the subject matter. It felt bleak in like the most dramatic way. I also didn't like their relationship with each other. I just felt like it was, I don't want to say problematic, but it's a little bit not healthy. That's all I'm gonna say about that, because yeah, that's those are my thoughts. The second author I wanted to give another chance to was Tessa Bailey. I read Fix Her Up by Tessa Bailey, and I didn't enjoy it. I specifically didn't enjoy the main character in that book because of the correlation between the main character's personality and how their romance went. It's this weird, like, jarring kind of contrast between a main character who was very very childlike and very in tune with their inner child, and very like bubbly and colorful, and like she felt very youthful in her character, that it was really jarring when they got to the romance scenes, because it would be this like complete flip, and that was just really weird to me. So that was kind of the main reason why I didn't like that book. But I heard about It Happened One Summer, and I heard that it was this kind of enemies to lovers, and it was this sort of like wild child kind of character versus someone who, not versus, but like against someone who is very like organized and very mature and blah blah blah, you know, that kind of a dynamic. And I've always wanted to find a romance that had that sort of dynamic. So I finished the second book for this little challenge of mine. I read It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey. So this book follows Piper, who is an LA socialite. Her stepfather is like some famous sort of director or something, and what's his name, Brendan, who is a fisherman in this small town. So in the beginning of the book, Piper gets caught doing something kind of illegal and she sort of ends up in jail for like a night or something, and then when she gets home, her stepfather is like, all right, you're a bit of a wild child, you're out of control, I want you to learn some responsibilities, so you have to go to this small town and kind of learn to be an adult, basically. There's like some other reasons why she's going there as well, why he put her there and everything. Her sister ends up going with her, and then you know, as soon as she gets there, she sort of meets this broody, grumpy, set in his ways kind of character, Brendan, who's this crab fisherman. It's a fishing town, I guess, and so a lot of the men there that stay in this town are all kind of in that field, and that is kind of their livelihood. So yeah, the romance is the trope, I guess. I would consider it more of an enemies to lovers, because they don't really get off on the right foot in the very beginning, and yeah, it goes from there. Oh, it's also, I guess you would call it a grumpy sunshine as well, because Piper is very, you know, positive and outgoing and chipper, and Brendan is not. There's a lot of other stuff that goes along in both Piper's and Brendan's backstory as well, which I don't want to say too much. I enjoyed it. I think I enjoyed it a lot more than Fix Her Up by Tessa Bailey. I think with Fix Her Up, I didn't like the jarring transition from the main character being this like very immature, very childish kind of character, to then being like a little bit of a minx. Like that kind of thing is very jarring to me. This one, I felt like the main character Piper was acted a little bit more adult, and I actually ended up really liking her. I've always wanted to find, here's the thing, this book reminds me of the plot of both Wild Child, the movie with Emma Roberts, and also, I don't know if anyone will remember, but there was an original Disney Channel original movie back in the day called Cowbells, and it was about these two rich girls going into the country and like working in a farm factory, like a dairy, not farm factory, a dairy factory. So yeah, that's what this kind of premise reminds me a little bit of. Yeah, I don't know, I was surprised that I actually kind of enjoyed this one for the most part. I don't know if I would ever pick another Tessa Bailey book up. I think it really depends on the premise, because I don't necessarily enjoy the way she writes romance. That's kind of how I'm basing all of these books on, right? Is how the romance is written, because they're all romance books, and that's kind of, you know, what I enjoy. Yeah, I don't like the way she writes the romances. I just felt like the transition from enemies to lovers was a little bit too quick for me. I like a little bit more tension. I think I also mentioned it in the like the icebreaker review that I did in a previous video, but I don't like when the two characters kind of get together earlier on in the book, because I think it really ruins the tension like of the whole book. Just I don't like it when books that I've noticed, the books that have been coming out lately, they just sort of, they make them kind of get together a lot quicker, and then the rest of the story is more about their emotion, which I get, but it's just not my kind of, it's not the way I like to read romance. And I'm not saying that they can't get together until like the last page, that's not what I'm saying at all, but I would like it to be a little held off until at least the second half of the book. I felt like this happened in like before the halfway mark, you know, and that was, yeah, I don't know, it was a little bit, it was still good, there was still enough tension from the outside plot and everything like that for it to keep me captivated, but I just, yeah, I wish it was less jarring that they went from enemies to lovers so quickly. The next book that I wanted to pick up, I wanted to go for more of a serious romance book, just because I felt like each of the two books that I read previously were sort of in their own little subgenre. So Punk 57 was more of that new adult angsty kind of romance book, and then It Happened One Summer is more of that fun kind of light-hearted contemporary. The next book I read is The Roughest Draft by Emily Wibberley and Siegemund-Broka. Sorry, I had to like zoom in on my phone to see his name, but yeah, just because the premise of this book felt very serious. I always say that there is a big difference between like romance books, like contemporary romance books, versus like the more, I would call them more like love stories, because they feel a lot more serious, a lot more literary, I guess, and it's less about the romance and more about the love story aspect of it, if that makes sense. I don't know, you might understand what I'm talking about, you might not. Anyway, that's what I kind of wanted to go for. The first book I read by these two authors was called If I'm Being Honest, which was a YA book, and like I said previously, it has that kind of wild child, popular girl versus not versus, but like with a more nerdy, kind of more serious, more mature man. So that's what that story was. I did kind of enjoy it for the most part. I just didn't enjoy it enough to keep the book for whatever reason, so I don't remember why I didn't enjoy it, but yeah, I like the idea of the premise. I think I just didn't quite enjoy the romance aspect of it. So anyway, I read The Roughest Draft by these two. Finished reading the third book for this whole giving authors a second chance challenge. I read The Roughest Draft by Emily Wibberley and Siegemund-Broka. I don't know if I'm pronouncing their last names right, but this follows two authors who are co-writers. They always write books together, but in the beginning of the book you find out that something happened 4 years ago that made them no longer speak to each other. So it's been 4 years and they have completely like cut ties with each other. They no longer write with each other. The female, the heroine Katrina, no longer writes at all. Like, she's completely retired as an author, and the hero Nathan is trying to sort of like write his own you know, be a solo author and like write his own books, but his books aren't really selling as well because a lot of their readership enjoyed their co-writing together. So something happens in the beginning of the book that forces Kat and Nathan to write together again, just for the last time. And yeah, that's all I'm gonna say about the premise. I don't know how I feel about this one because I really actually loved the writing style that these two authors have together. I think their writing style and the way they write like a love story is really good. I don't know how to explain it, because it's like I really like the writing style, but I don't necessarily love the romance or the love story in this book, but I think that's like because I don't necessarily like the premise and the romance between the two characters. Does that make sense? So I would love to see, even though I didn't enjoy this one as much, I would love to see more romances or love stories from these two authors. I will say though, this book made me be a lot more motivated to start writing my own story. Well, it's not, I'm not really starting a new story, it's just the story that I've sort of been thinking about for the past like 5 years, since like 2018 when I finished NaNoWriMo. So yeah, I think what I've noticed about my taste is that I don't particularly like books that switch between the past and the present, especially if it's one of those second chance romance type books. I haven't read a lot of them, but the ones that I have tried to read I don't necessarily like, because it's always like they have a fresh new sort of kindling romance in the past, and then something happens and then they're trying to like reignite that romance in the present with all this like already added knowledge of what they know about each other in the past. And I don't like reading about that necessarily. I don't like reading it like that. I prefer reading something where I'm discovering things about the characters just as like alongside them discovering things about each other. Does that make sense? So yeah, I think that's just like my taste. And so it, like I said, I really like the writing style. I would love to see more from these authors, but I just didn't like this one as much. So the last book I read is by an author who I was so looking forward to reading one of her books, and I was so disappointed in her book that that I made a whole book review about how I didn't like that particular book, and that author is Mariana Zapata. So I first read All Roads Lead Here by her last year, I think. Yeah, I think it was last year, and I was so looking forward to that book because I heard that it was this grumpy sunshine, not really enemies to lovers, but it is that like grumpy person versus, why do I keep saying verses? They're not versing each other. With a more bubbly kind of happy kind of character, which I always usually like. That's kind of why I like that kind of like wild child and a like more mature person kind of dynamic, just because it's usually that kind of grumpy sunshine sort of dynamic, which I really like. Anyway, and I also heard that that was about hiking. There was going to be a lot of hiking in it, and it was going to be very outdoorsy and stuff, and I love all that stuff like in my real life, so I thought I was going to enjoy it in book form. I didn't enjoy it. I particularly didn't like Mariana Zapata's writing style in that book because she was so repetitive for no reason. I just felt like she was repetitive in order to make her books 500 pages, which I don't see the point in doing. because it wasn't even the slow burn of the romance in that particular book, because they barely interacted at all. So I just didn't feel the romance at all. But I've heard so much about from Lukov with Love, and so I thought, you know what, I'll give her a second chance, because she does have a lot of books out, and so if I do like her books, I've got a lot to read. So I finished the 4th book for this challenge. I read From Lukov with Love by Mariana Zapata. This follows Jasmine, who is a figure skater, and we also follow a boy named Ivan Lukov. So Jasmine is trying to find a person to pair with for her figure skating, and she gets paired up with Ivan, who she's sort of known forever because she is best friends with Ivan's little sister, and also the place that she trains in is owned by Ivan's family. Ivan is known as this like really good figure skater himself. Like, he's won a lot of gold medals, and he's just really good. She's sort of the opposite. She's really good, but she has never really won like medals or anything like that. I think the issue with her books that I don't like, that I don't gel with, is her writing style. Her books are like 400 to 500 pages, sometimes even 600 pages, and you don't need that much to write a romance. I understand that her books mainly focuses on the more slow burn kind of romance, and I enjoy the slow burn of her romances, but to me personally, I don't think she uses the slow burn excuse or the slow burn trope in the best way. To me, her issue is always with her writing style. She's so repetitive, and it's not just that she's repetitive in terms of describing a scene. She's repetitive in the words that she uses. So she has this, I see this a lot, especially with this one. I can't remember in All Roads Lead Here, but when her like main character thinks, she thinks in circles, and I get that is normal life. That is what people do. I do that too. I think in circles. That's how I process things. I understand that that's what she's trying to show, but I don't need it to be the whole page, you know. Sometimes she tries to make a point, and then she tries to push the point even further so that it cements in your brain that this is the type of character that we're dealing with, and then she does that 2 times more, and I'm like, I don't need this. So yeah, that's my biggest issue with her, is that not only is she just really wordy, but she's really wordy in what I feel like a useless kind of way. Like, I don't, you know, and it took away from me enjoying this book. Don't get me wrong, I think this one is a lot better than All Roads Lead Here in terms of the romance anyway. And at first I didn't like Jasmine as a main character because she was so defensive and stubborn and just like really annoying, and here's my point with her writing style. Because she was not a very likable character in the beginning, I knew that she was going to grow as a person throughout the book, right? I knew, I've read enough books at this point to know that character development is going to happen and it's going to be really good. So I was almost going to DNF this, but I pushed through because I was like, no, I know that she's going to grow and I'm going to give her a second chance. That's the whole point of this video. So I kept reading, and I did like the slow development of Jasmine's character. I did like how she grew as a person and she became more mature and everything like that. But again, it took way too long than it needed to. I get that she's trying to to show that, you know, people don't grow overnight and people don't grow in an instant, and it does take baby steps for someone to grow up, basically. I get that, but we don't have to read every single moment, every single detail, and repeat the same mistakes multiple times. If you want to, if you want her to repeat the same mistakes like once or twice, that's completely fine, but we don't need to be doing that 4 or 5 times, which is what I felt like in this book. So yeah, I don't know if I will pick up another Mariana Zapata, to be honest with you. They're just too long and I don't like her writing style. So yeah, all in all, I think I'm happy that I gave all these authors a second chance, just because they do have a lot of books out and I don't want to miss out on anything if I find out that they're actually really good. I think, what did I say? I think I said that out of the 4, I think I might only want to pick up 2 of the authors again, so that's half, that's 50%, that's pretty good. Yeah. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this little challenge of mine. Let me know if you want me to read from any other authors that I've mentioned in the past, and let me know what other reading challenges you'd like to see from me in the future. Anyway, I hope you're having a great day, and I'll see you next time.